Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully some others will join us. Thank you all for being part of this meeting. I'm Carol Vention, the president of the local league. Just by way of brief introduction, one of the important things that the league does at all levels is to develop a program of topics that are studied and then positions adopted. And after members decide to adopt a topic for study, there's a research committee appointed that studies the issue, analyzes information, clarifies the issues, and they present all sides of it to our members. The study may include tours, guest speakers, interviews, and other activities. And when the study's been completed and our members have adopted it, the document is published. So one of our studies that did become part of our program in 1962 was having to do with the Port of Coos Bay. We'd adopted that that position supporting the port at that time, and since then there have been 2 updates about approximately 20 years apart, so it's time for number 3. So we have a committee, research committee appointed. Christine Moffett is the chair of that committee, and other authors of the report so far are Steve Miller and Ann Bellamy. So Christine, would you go ahead and start your presentation? And this is being recorded.
Yes, I am going to share my screen, which has a presentation of our background for the Port of Coos Bay. I am a retired fishery biologist and have been active in a number of volunteer organizations for years, and I have with me in this study Ann Bellamy and Steve Miller, and Steve will actually give a portion of this presentation today. I thank you for joining us. We'll get right into where we are in this study. The port has been a subject, as Carol mentioned, of League of Women Studies for several decades now. Our first study was in the 60s, finalized in 62, and then it was revisited and updated in 81 and 2000, and now this update has begun last year, and we are moving forward with gathering of some information on this. As Carol indicated, we try to be very comprehensive in our studies and are careful in terms of collecting information and holding careful analysis of what we find. So just a little introduction to the whole issue of ports in the state of Oregon. There's strong legal code in 4 major documents. I'm going to talk about more about one of them in particular, but there's 23 recognized ports and port businesses in Oregon, and a good portion of these are on the Columbia River, and then we have the coastal ports, 12 of those, and among the ports we have deep water ports on the coast at Astoria, Coos Bay, Newport, and then Portland and St. Helens. Here are deep water ports served through the estuary of the Columbia River. So just a little digging into how the authority works in the ports. We have authorization primarily in ORS chapter 777. It's a very detailed legislative chapter. There's a lot of references specific to Coos Bay within that reference. But some of the important take-homes are that the power and authority given a port is vested in a board of 5 commissioners. And so I'm just presenting here right now. We have 5 commissioners that are representing the Port of Coos Bay. The authorities and provisions of ports are also detailed in the ORS 777. And there's quite a bit of authority given to the ports. They have a perpetual succession. They can carry out corporate powers, and they have authority to have bonds, contracts, receive and dispose of real estate and personal property. They also can be sued or plead in suits or proceedings. The primary sort of background in terms of the ports is really related to economic development and trade, as it's detailed in 777. The details for the Port of Portland are in 778, and I'm not going to go through those today. They're a bit more comprehensive. But essentially the background is that the legislation was to enhance world trade opportunities and expand overseas markets, as well as diversify the economic base of the state. There's a unique component also in the code that is related to, I guess I would say, some priority in promptly responding to any kind of necessary permits by the state agencies, or helping with financial assistance. So they get a little leg up with the agencies in some of their requests. So the port policy goals that were developed in the last study are listed here, and this is a very comprehensive list, and we will be posting this information on our web. But today's discussion is really centered around a process of public opinion and review, and actually revisiting a position that recognized a functioning represented port advisory committee, which seems to be not available for us at this point. The background of the port is long. We're talking about the early 1900s, and it wasn't until 1987 that the international port designation was determined. So I'm going to pause my screen right now and ask for Steve to kind of give us a little bit of his background that he's put together on this. Steve Miller, if you can join us right now, that would be great.
Yeah, would you like me to?
There, that's good.
Yeah, you'd like me to go ahead and survey the timeline then. Okay. I've worked on a timeline of significant port events and projects it's been involved in over the last 20 years for this league study, but I also looked further back in the past to possibly find any trends that provide context for this present 20-year study. I used a variety of references, including the Capital Press, KCBY-TV, OPB, Oregon Live, Port of Coos Bay website, the Eugene Register Guard newspaper, The Job Messiahs, a book by Wim Breen, the Oregonian newspaper, the World newspaper, and various agency documents. And that is much of the list. There were certain characteristics of the early history of port activity. From about 1906 until 1970, the port raised money from government and private business interests for its main missions of dredging the harbor and channel for shipping use by the wood products industries and to maintain the small boat basin harbor in Charleston. In fact, most port activity centered on industries extracting value from abundant natural resources, including wood products and commercial fishing, which were the largest employers and financial contributors to the local economy. Logs, lumber, and wood chips were shipped from a busy Port of Coos Bay. And in the 1970s, it was described as the biggest shipper of wood products in the world. I was told by a man who'd worked in the woods and was a local car repairman that you could go down on any street corner in the cities with a lunch bucket and dress for work before sunup, and you could be picked up by a crummy, one of those work buses that would go out onto the corporate timberlands for the day's work, and you would have a job. This supply of conifer forest was practically endless in the view of many people who worked in the industry and the industry descriptions of it, but that dream had faded by the 1970s. There were some new long-lasting concerns that had appeared that led to declines in production and jobs. The leading concerns were corporate timberland depletion, environmental harms needing addressing, and big technological advances had brought more efficiency to the processes that create wood products, and that affected jobs. In commercial fishing, there was a trawler fleet, still part of which we have, that caught Chinook and coho salmon. Trawlers, also known as draggers, dragged nets for bottom fish and other species, and crabbers set out boatloads of baited crab pots offshore. Ocean conditions, harvest levels, and inland watershed impacts had effects on the catch. State and federal agencies used regulations of fishing efforts in attempts to maintain ocean fish and crab stocks. While the natural resources-based economy struggled and unemployment rose, the port began to aggressively reach out for and welcome and assist almost any opportunities or projects that might locate here and give the area an economic boost. Several of those attempted projects were unmistakable failures and were derided by critics and the public, resulting in years of wariness and outright distrust of port initiatives. Some on that list are pretty well known by people who've lived here a while. The T-Dock, the Crossline Ferry, a port-built fish waste plant located in downtown Charleston, built for TIPA Incorporated, and Canada Coal Company, which was an effort to revive low-grade coal from local sources as a valuable export commodity. The T-Dock and Crossline Ferry projects suffered from a lack of clear assessments of the viability of their project ideas before a decision was made by the port. And the TIPA and Canada Coal Company concepts also lacked careful appraisals of their potential, and the port failed to determine the competence or trustworthiness of the entrepreneurs it partnered with, or the considerable environmental impacts of either project. Another type of project came to Coos Bay as the timber industry declined, and that was salmon ranching. Two companies obtained permits to release smolts into the bay that would hopefully return from the ocean as adults and harvested. They were Oregon Aqua Foods that had facilities in Newport and also in Coos Bay, and Anadromous Incorporated, which had a release site here in Coos Bay. I worked for Anadromous Incorporated for about 2 years, and it was exciting work, but it failed for reasons similar to those of earlier port projects: a lack of knowledge in what turned out to be an experiment and poor management decisions, but also predation and the release of low-quality smolts to compete in the ocean were factors. Bill McNeil, the president of Oregon Aqua Foods, commented that what we really ended up doing was feeding the birds. A few other port projects were taken on during that period before this current league study. In 1986, The port bought an unused tank farm at the base of Newmark Avenue on the waterfront, hoping to supply fuel to the Polish whiting fleet, very active offshore at that time. It soon leased the facility to a fuels company whose lease payments made a profit for the port during its 6 years of operation. In 1987, there was a ferrochromium smelting plant proposed for the North Spit by P.J. Wooding, claiming to be an international leader in the metal smelting industry and to have a new process that would have no harmful emissions. That project idea and the port got some help when the state promised economic development funds to help. And the port would provide a 40-acre site and the T-dock, all for no charge. PP&L promised a $4 million substation and low electrical rates and bought a $2 million interest in the project. Public opposition appeared when the smelting industry record was seen, and Whitting's process would likely produce dangerous emissions, and almost all locations on Coos Bay would be downwind of the site at certain times of the year. The company insisted no harmful air or water pollution would occur, but the process was unproven. A world newspaper editorial said, however, in support of it, that big thinkers like Whitting sweep aside the little thinkers, and they guarantee a future of jobs and security. Whitting left the area and tried to locate that project in Vancouver and Victoria, BC, and other Canadian towns, and was rejected, and it was not built in the Pacific Northwest. In 1989, Daisho, a paper manufacturing company, expressed an interest in building a $500 million pulp mill on the North Spit. Water supply was to be met by taking water from the Millicoma River in 10-mile lakes. Also, problems with land acquisition, environmental and health concerns, and a soft pulp market eventually led Daisho to pull out of Coos Bay. The company finally chose a less costly expansion of its pulp mill in Port Angeles, Washington. The promise of hundreds of jobs associated with a big pulp mill was very appealing to workers who had seen the permanent downturn of the timber industry. But the threat to public health and the impact of the mills taking 10 to 30 million gallons per day of water from two of the area's favorite recreation waters was not acceptable. Despite both cities on Coos Bay supporting the project, citizens groups produced and passed a Measure 6-1, which prevented future siting of pulp mills on Coos Bay. In 1997, Nucor Corporation announced it was considering building a mini steel mill on the North Spit, which would employ up to 225 non-union workers at an average wage of $57,000 a year. But the largest American steel manufacturer at that time was also looking at 3 other locations, shopping around. Obstacles appeared for Nucor in Coos Bay. Negotiations with Weyerhaeuser to purchase property stalled when Weyerhaeuser demanded that Nucor pay for any potential cleanup required for any contamination found on the property. Nucor also failed to provide information for the Bonneville Power Administration so they could produce an environmental impact statement. Pay was good, but unions objected to a bad company safety record. Nucor decided on a less costly, less complicated way by acquiring, renovating, and expanding an existing facility of a bankrupt steel mill in Auburn, Washington. In 1997, the port leased 32 acres on the North Spit to DB Western for industrial construction. Currently, the company is still based at that site. In 2004, the port sold Southport Forest Products 32 acres, including the port barge slip, for $15,000 an acre. After some recognition in reconfiguration, it was in 2007, the barge slip has seen some limited use for barge movement of logs, wood chips, and other cargo. Southport built and operates a sawmill on the North Spit using the rail spur bordering the site to transport finished lumber. In 2007, Verison a Calgary, Canada pipeline company filed an application with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, for an LNG import project on Coos Bay. The Jordan Cove Energy Project and Pacific Connector gas pipeline. But with the fracking boom in American oil and natural gas fields, any need for imports and that project was evaporating. In 2013, Veresen filed applications with FERC for an LNG export terminal and natural gas pipeline to feed gas to the facility, eyeing export opportunities to Asia. Strong local opposition was growing, though, and local citizens groups, environmental organizations, the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians, and individuals raised concerns. FERC denied that application, stating Veresen hadn't shown need for the project and its benefits didn't outweigh harms to justify the use of eminent domain. In 2015, there was a strategic business plan completed by the state and the individual ports to comply with Business Oregon requirements. Business Oregon is the economic development agency for the state, which invests funds and provides guidance in economic development plans statewide. The Port of Coos Bay plan describes its current port functions and costs, compliance with various zoning and statewide planning goals, future aspirations and projects, and estimated financial requirements to carry out those anticipated developments. The strategic business plan states its mission as, quote, promoting sustainable development that enhances the economy of Southwest Oregon and the state. The scale and type of development the 2015 plan envisions does tip sharply toward heavy industrial projects, but there also appears to be a recognition of the consistent and growing contributions to the area economy of the Port's Charleston Marina. The marina's associated facilities, including the RV park and other port properties in Charleston. Several boatyard improvements and replacements important for Charleston businesses, building and repairing commercial fishing vessels have been planned or completed. These lease or rental fees have contributed reliable, significant funding for port operations and programs for decades. And some are heavily used by tourists and other sport recreationists drawn to this area by the wealth of natural resources found throughout our area and the nearby ocean. An example of the planned heavy industrial development in the 2015 business plan points to several closely related, very big capital improvement projects to achieve the specific port goal of creating a top-tier international shipping port in a class with those at LA, Long Beach, and Puget Sound. These include several shipping terminals, a massive channel dredging project, and major rebuilding of a substandard rail line to Eugene. That vision comes into conflict with other competing visions for a prosperous, livable Coos Bay area future. At this present time, these issues are coming into full view when important decisions are being made for us all. These choices will get a closer look as part of this continuing league study, recognizing that among the league goals in support of the Port of Coos Bay is to develop an adequate process through which public opinion can be heard and reviewed by commissioners. In 2017, Veresen sold to Pembina Pipeline Corporation of Calgary, Canada, which accelerated that Coos Bay LNG terminal and pipeline project, filing new applications with the FERC that year. This massive regional estimated $10 billion project received enthusiastic support from both of our local cities and Coos County. Powerful economic interests joined in support, as did several trade unions. Corporate-sponsored advertisements continually claimed in all available media that it would generate up to 6,000 high-paying jobs in the region and directly benefit declining stocks of coho salmon. A group receiving funding from the project developer was formed to promote the project. A diverse opposition of environmental, citizen, and recreational organizations, marine and fishery scientists, Southern Oregon tribes, landowner groups, and individual citizens was also immediately evident and growing. In 2019, GMA Garnet opened a garnet processing and recycling plant in the Bunker Hill area of Coos Bay. It makes garnet products for sandblasting and water jet cutting uses and recycles used garnet blasting material for future use. Products are mainly marketed on the west coast of the US, but also distributed internationally. The Oregon Department of Environmental Quality in 2019 denied the Section 401 Clean Water Act permit for the Jordan Cove Energy Project because it could not demonstrate that it would meet Oregon's clean water standards. Pembina didn't reapply, but sought an order from FERC that Oregon had waived its permitting authority over the project. In 2020, the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development denied a Coastal Zone Management Act consistency certification for the project. Also in 2020, the FERC approved the Jordan Cove project and its pipeline, but with conditions, including the requirement that crucial state of Oregon permits be obtained before construction could proceed. In 2021, FERC denied the Jordan Cove petition to nullify the DEQ's permitting authority. Later in December, Pembina notified FERC that it wished to have its awarded permits withdrawn, formally putting an end to the Jordan Cove Energy Project and its Pacific Connector gas pipeline. In 2021, in September of that year, the Port of Coos Bay announced it had entered into a memorandum of understanding with North Point Development to construct a multimodal container facility on the North Spit. That is the timeline survey of significant events that I've been able to locate at this time and that I've been able to find. I hope to add more information on the port's current programs and plans as those become available.
So I know that Steve mentioned some of the opposition that came into the Jordan Cove project, and I'm just highlighting here the work that the League of Women Voters did in opposition. That it was a 4-league group that filed a number of appropriate policy analyses to DEQ, Army Corps of Engineers, DSL, DLCD, and FERC. And so this is the federal navigation channel that we talk about that are part and parcel of some of the proposals that are coming to forth right now. So I'm going to just give you a little pictorial of some of the things that Steve mentioned in his overview. The 20-year plan, the business plan, strategic business plan, which is a requirement in order to meet the needs of the legislation. The ports have to file these. And so we'll just review a little bit of the mission that Steve mentioned, promoting sustainable development that enhances the economy of Southwest Oregon. And these are the properties that were in that. They're not all the same now because that doesn't include some of the new property that is under purchase right now. And this just a little visual review of the goals in that in terms of capital improvement. And then the rest of this presentation today is going to kind of use some of the port designated principles that were in their strategic plan. And not every one of these, but the ones that are highlighted here in yellow are the things that are most in the future and in the proposals that are still being considered right now. And this is investing in the marine and rail infrastructure and appropriate industrial and marine industrial properties. And then the final thing is the responsible environmental stewardship. So the Coos Bay rail line recent developments within the theme of investing marine and rail infrastructure. This material that I'm presenting here is really only from reports and from news feeds that have been available from the port, and summarizes that new funding is being sought, and that over the past recent years there have been almost $20 million from Connect Oregon for projects, and to recognize that the port does operate and own the 134-mile rail line that comes from Coos Bay to Eugene. The two items that are the most recent that Steve mentioned are certainly two here that we've shown in picture here. The Georgia Pacific property purchase, which is now referred to as Terminal 1 by the port. And this is all recent information because of a purchase and sale agreement for the former GP facility that was abandoned by GP over a year or so ago. And the total project cost for that's estimated at about $14.5 million. And they're planning for a bond issuance that could cover that. They're seeking financing via the Business Oregon Infrastructure Authority, this IFA loan, which is available to ports. And then they've also received some American Rescue Plan funds for additional contributions to that loan. The other proposal that we're just reviewing from the information we've received from press releases and attending meetings is for this 2.4 million 20-foot box shipping every year. And this is an agreement with the North Point Development Group that's based in Missouri. And so we don't have a lot of information on this, but one of the things that we think is important is just to try to understand what this size of a container facility would be vis-a-vis other facilities. And so we are kind of showing you what this 2.4 would look like in contrast to other major container ports. And this is information that Anna's put together showing that this annual, these are statistics for container ports specifically. And these 20-foot equivalents I show here in this is kind of what the structure that we're talking about. They're 20-foot long, they're 8-foot wide, and they're 8.5 feet high. And so if you look at the million they're abbreviated as TEUs. And so the Northwest ports that are nearby, or at least that you can envision, SeaTac has 3.8 of those. Vancouver, BC reports 3.4. And certainly Long Beach and LA are the massive container ports, and Oakland here at 2.4. So it gives you an idea of how large these transport numbers are and what is perceived as a potential here for Coos Bay. So what we know so far of the applications for the railroad improvements is that there's a proposal that's been put out for $36 million match from this North Point development that would that would be put in addition to the $73 million application to the CRISI program, which is a Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety program that's run nationally. And so this proposal, we believe, has been put in, and it's to fix tunnels and provide for improved siting so that the improved transportation of the rail line from Coos Bay to Eugene. So the progress that we've made to date on sort of our goal 7, which is public opinion can be heard and reviewed by commissioners. This kind of highlights where we are in our first steps. We're certainly seeking many more details, and we plan considerable review ahead. In terms of looking at what some of the public opinion that has not come from the league at all, but we just are going to provide some of this from recent port meetings. And so some of the public opinion is been put forth regarding environmental stewardship and integrating environmental considerations in all strategic planning and business decisions. And this is part of the principles that the port has in its strategic plan. But some of these comments have been asking what sort of feasibility study has been completed, how would this work given the remote location, talking about that the highway and rail system are not particularly adequate, and looking at the proposed location for Terminal 2, what sort of provisions would be able to be put there to handle this kind of a freight. There's many regulatory and environmental questions that have been raised by the public to date regarding the navigation channel, air quality, jobs, and some questions about the GP site. The final concerns detail some of the things about adequate funding and what sort of shortages we might have in truck, ship, and loading operators, and some of the legal sources and issues that need clarification. So to summarize where we are is that we're going to be continuing to gather information and attend meetings, provide interviews, and all the things that Carol provided in her introduction of how we do these studies. We're going to evaluate the details of the programs and operations, and we want to really focus on the Charleston port operations and the port infrastructure in Charleston, and hope to provide a draft report to the membership by late in 2022. So before I close this presentation, I just want to thank all of you for listening today, and thank our members that have put together this presentation for you. And if you're interested in joining our study, please contact Carol, and she can put you in touch with us or contact us directly. I'm going to Steve, but let's see, we need to.
Christine?
Yes,
we
ma'am.
do have some chat messages I wanted to open up here and share.
That would be great.
With the group.
I'm going to go to the gallery here right now, and so we have a series of messages here. If there's questions that you want to ask right now, I think we have a little bit of time for that. If you want to ask a question, I would say that you can unmute yourself and ask a question or raise your hand. Michael.
You know, there's such an infrastructure shortage here. I just wonder how feasible all of this really is to get up to the size where the 2.4 million a year could be shipped out. I'm very familiar with the city of Oakland and its port, and what a big deal it is, and economic engine is certainly a plus on that. But we don't even have highway in place to be able to support this. But maybe highway isn't necessary. Is this all rail that it's going to be? That's my question.
Well, since we didn't put the proposal together, we don't know, but those are really important questions to ask. Certainly any of the other ports, I've spent some time working on ballast issues in ports, and any of the ports I've visited to, there are considered multimodal, and which means that you've got to be able to handle trucks and rail as well as ships.
There is a new message asking, isn't there a snowy plover breeding ground at the southern end of the North Spit? That would be an Endangered Species Act issue. Christine, are you aware of the location of a snowy plover breeding ground?
Yeah, and I actually do not know the proposed site of the multimodal. We're guessing at it, but I have not seen a map. But everything that's talked about is on the estuary side, not the beach side of the dunes. So in terms of the plovers are going to be out on the ocean side.
We then have another comment. It's been reported that rail improvements will cost $1 billion from here to Eugene. Not sure where that estimate is from, but
I think, Steve, you and Ann were trying to come up with the estimates for that, but I don't have anything right now for what the real estimates are.
Yeah, I have nothing specific that I would, support. I just haven't read any clear figures. I've heard some suggestions it might cost $1 billion, and there's a whole lot to do in that project, that's for sure. Almost complete replacement to bring it up to high-class shipping standards. So it would be very expensive, yeah.
any other questions from anyone?
So
Lois?
has there been an environmental assessment, or I'm wondering if noise pollution is considered part of the environmental impact statement? Has there been, or do they not have to do an EIS?
I am not aware of any permits that have been requested. Certainly DLCD and DSL are going to be part and parcel of that, as well as DEQ. So as far as I know, and maybe Steve or Ann has, or somebody in the audience knows, but I haven't seen any permits that have been put forth at this point.
Which would trigger an EIS.
So another question I have is, when Georgia Pacific, did they sell the property to the Port of Coos Bay? And was there any cleanup of, or do these companies just kind of cut and run and leave their waste behind?
Steve, you want to handle that? I know there's reference to there are two stages that they're asking for funding. One is to secure the property, which I think they've done, and then second is funding to handle environmental assessment.
There is the DEQ in its final report when the site was cleared found metals in surface soils, which was in measurable amounts. And they found also that there were contaminated sediments in the bay out in front of the dock area. And GMA Garnet was the company that has located there, the one I mentioned that's producing garnet abrasive materials. They were given permission to dredge 30,000 cubic yards out in front to bring the depth to 37 feet and to clean up some of that contaminated sediment out in front of that site. That was part of their agreement with the port. And I don't know that that has been done, but that was an agreement that that would be done.
I
Any
also had
other?
a question. I also had a question about the
Oh.
GP site. Have we seen anything at all about what they intend to do there? Because it would require so much dredging of the entire bay to bring any big ships up there. They can't possibly have it in mind as a container port, or a container facility. So I'm wondering what they intend to do with the GP site, and I'm wondering if anybody knows.
I'll take a short stab on that. From what I've been able to glean, and maybe there can be other contributions. Again, we are trying to get more information, but if you were to bring in large containers, then they could ferry them to that other site for storage and offloading. So, I mean, there's a true limitation that they cannot exceed 37-foot depth on the other side of the bridge. The bridge, if that were dredged to 45 feet or 47 feet below the bridge, it would destabilize it. So that is a true barrier to deep port access, or deeper port access into the upper bay. And maybe Steve might have a comment on that.
I wasn't clear on what that point was again.
I just want to know what they want to do at GP.
I read some comment by the port that they would look to land and send out occasional various cargoes, and they weren't specific on what those cargoes would be, but it sounded like it would be not every day, but somewhat infrequent, those activities. And the cost of the project at a little over 14 million for the total project, you can't build much of a container or a big bulk facility for that kind of money. So they might get a crane in there and a pad and have access with some road to the dock, but I don't know what they could do really in a serious heavy duty way.
A former comment here from Janet Moore noted that she said they also plan to develop a cargo shipping terminal at the GP site, and she's got a link here. Some of you may be interested in following. It's the Port of Coos Bay news release in October 2021, it looks like, that has more information on that.
I read the news release and it was much too vague to be at all useful as far as I was concerned.
Yes.
I want to know what they actually intend to do there, not vague generalities. And then my other question was, I saw some comments in Anne's summary of the last port meeting about a feasibility study that was done, I don't know, 15 years ago or so. And I'm wondering if we have access to that feasibility study for a large container facility.
Steve, you shared some more of that, I believe.
Well, there was a general cargo study done by Parsons Brinkerhoff, which is a internationally renowned consulting firm, and they were asked by the port to do a feasibility study of the area for various cargoes, and they didn't find, in a general sense, that Coos Bay was suited to host that kind of a facility and successfully operate it. Because the port has had no experience in that kind of thing. We're isolated from outlying areas that can produce goods to ship out of here or receive and consume goods that were received here. So it just seemed that they found that it was a high risk investment to go for a big port cargo facility here. And we do have some not full reports, but we have some information from some reports. The league does.
All right, any other questions or comments?
I think I was just going to say that we have all those questions too. And that's the point of doing further study and maybe somehow talking to the commissioners directly and asking them these questions, because we have many of the same unknowns.
Thank you, Lois. And then Paula.
I was just wondering if other industries that are would be impacted by this, if they have the opportunity for any input, or is there opportunity just to attend the Port of Coos Bay meetings and ask questions that get no answer or vague answers?
Well, legally, there have to be permits. I mean, DLCD and DSL are going to be big players in this. And so in terms of understanding all the components of land use and recognized coastal resources, I mean, like we said, there's, as far as we know, there's been no applications made for permitting. What is being done now is applications for money. But I don't know whether the money is requiring a permit to be in place. You know, those are other good questions regarding what sort of a stepwise progression is here, as Anne articulated.
Paula?
I just was curious about Steve's comments about this internationally recognized consulting or firm or whatever you called it.
Mm-hmm.
Was that study done at the request of the port? Did the port pay for that?
It was commissioned by the port.
And despite their conclusions, the port has gone ahead with the purchase?
It seems so, yeah. Although they're not identifying what particular cargo they're going to handle at the one at Bunker Hill, at the GP Mill site, still it seems that report's conclusion that general cargo, a big general cargo site or operation would not be feasible in Coos Bay, on Coos Bay. And that would apply, I think, to the GP Mill site too.
Yeah, crazy. I just wanted clarification on that. It's hard to believe that they would commission this report and then based on the conclusion say, oh, well, we still want to do it.
There was some talk that there was another report that had been done in the last year or two. And I don't know that that's available, and I don't have certainty that there was such a report done. But they may have commissioned another one, but I'm not sure. I should find out.
Thank you.
Check the chat, because Janet Moore has been putting some information about studies in there.
Thank you.
I had another question that I forgot to ask.
Right here.
To whom is the Port of Coos Bay responsible? Do they answer directly to the governor? Do they answer to DSL? How do they fit in the framework of governance?
They are required to report to the legislature. And we have been trying to get copies of those reports and have not been successful at this point. But there's also strong requirements, as I reviewed in the front end, the 4 major legislative components of governance and assistance for the ports, go into this business planning. And so that is why we did have the 2015 strategic business plan, because that is a requirement in order to even apply for funds. And so the funds that are requested have to be related to the strategic business plan. But beyond that, we're not actually sure, and we've been trying to get copies of the legislative reports, and so far have not been successful. We have also invited the commissioners to meet with us at a meeting, and we have not been successful in that.
So this is not the first time container ships were being discussed. Back when, and decades ago, when LNG was first brought up, the same kind of shipping overload in all the West Coast ports was going on, and there was talk about bringing container ships in here then. So, and I don't know how far the studies got and the preliminary stuff got. It was dropped when the economy tanked and the shipping ports weren't overloaded anymore. But if somebody could go back and look for that, there was some pretty deep discussion, and they went with LNG instead of the container ports, but they were both being discussed in detail at the same time.
Susan, Janet Moore has put in chat that there were 2 feasibility studies done in 2000, and she knows that Wim de Vriend has copies of those. And then she knows the group Citizens for Renewables is meeting about this. If the county had updated the estuary management plan, as they were supposed to, this type of heavy industry wouldn't be allowed, she says. And she, Janet said she spoke at the last 2 port meetings and they did not answer the questions on this. So she is encouraging the league to talk to the port, as we are planning to do. Michael?
I'd love to have a conversation with Kathy McEwen about some of this. She was very involved for quite some time with the port.
Christine and Ann and Steve, there's a thought for you.
Yes,
Anything?
That sounds like a good suggestion, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
One of the early studies was commissioned by one of the big Scandinavian shipping container companies, a worldwide thing, and they'd invested, maybe not millions, but hundreds of thousands in a very complete study, and they gave up on the whole thing.
Are you referring to one of those 2000 studies?
Probably. I wasn't here until after that.
Okay. Steve, did you have something else?
Well, I did not know, and it may be possible that the port did receive money from Maersk, that big international shipper, to do that feasibility study. I hadn't heard that before, but that may well be.
One of the things that Steve has pointed out in our discussions to date has helped help people understand that sometimes these proposals are made by one business operation to kind of jog the support in another location. And Steve, maybe you can just make a couple comments in that before we close the meeting, because that's a sort of an interesting concept.
Well, there seem to be good accounts of a pulp mill and a smelter and other of these big industrial operations looking around in a region that they want to locate. They find places that have suitable conditions. They also look for the best tax breaks, the best zones for their activity, maybe some free facilities, various supports that add to the lowering the cost of developing a project site. And they do shop around. Nucor, one of the steel mills that tried to locate here, they were openly looking at 3 other sites and looking for the best deal, and they ultimately moved out of Coos Bay. But yeah, there is that active thing going on. They don't put out all their eggs in one basket, so to speak.
New chat here showing Maersk was showing interest in the port in 2007. Anything else? Christine, does that conclude your program?
It does. We appreciate your attending and the information that we garnered. And again, we are looking for additional members to join our team. If there's an interest there, please step forth. There's a lot of work ahead, and we really appreciate all of your attention to this, and we plan to continue to sojourn on.
Michael?
No comment.
Okay.
I'm long overdue to join.
Does that mean you're joining in?
Probably. Yes.
All right. I'm sure that's being duly noted right now. Okay, well, thanks so much, everyone. And you could continue to direct questions at Christine, and she could forward on, or directly to Stephen and Anne as well, as this proceeds. Thank you, everyone.